Doesn't matter what you do, but how do you meet it? What is the quality? Are you able to meet your body with a loving intent? So we've basically got two states of our nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Both are useful, but if we get stuck in our sympathetic nervous system state too often, this is like the state that we need to really upregulate ourselves to like get shit done or evade being killed by a tiger, or when we're really under threat or under attack. It's like all the alert systems in the body upregulate to keep us safe, to get us away from danger. But if you live in that all the time, that's actually a really dangerous place to live, because it exhausts all of the energy of your body. It's a proving ground for pain and tension to accumulate. And there's so many of us that are stuck in constant states of sympathetic nervous system. So today we're going to go through how we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system and spend more time in a rest and digest and replenishment and nourishment state. And this has taken me a long time to understand, and a lot of practice and working with thousands of people. And so Marcus and I will share 4 key things that we've learned on our journey to support you to move into that parasympathetic nervous system state more gracefully. So here's how to flick the switch. So the first step that inevitably comes up is you're likely going to face some sort of resistance. We want to embrace this resistance because so commonly, here's how it will get talked about most of the time in the health and wellness field. Like, do this thing, do yoga, do qigong, do breathing practices, with this expectation, like, that's easy, like I can say for me now, it's pretty easy, but that's taken like 20 years of practice for me to cultivate that. I don't think that it needs to take that long for someone when when they know what they're doing, but I've had a lot of trial and error and made a lot of mistakes and all sorts of different things. But to expect that you would go into a practice, meditation is another example, and just to be able to switch into it straight away is an unrealistic expectation. And it's one thing that's going to keep you in a perpetual state of dysregulation, I find, because you put this external pressure upon yourself of like, oh, I should be able to calm my mind, and I should be able to breathe deeper, and I should be able to move this way, and da 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 da. Before you even get started, there's like this layer of pressure and stress. So let's talk about the resistance that can come up and how we can go about embracing it. I'll hand over to you, Marcus.
Yeah, and then often you think, or I thought, or people I work with think, oh, I'm too lazy. I don't get the thing done. I only should those practices and everything would be good. And this is again very stressful for your nervous system because you go against yourself and you think you're wrong and you're, I don't know, in German we call it Schweinehund. It's like a combination of pig and dog. Like, oh, I just have to overcome my Schweinehund, and also, oh no, that's not a thing. It's a natural reaction. It's not about trying all the time to push against it and just take yourself here and oh, just do it. Because in this matter, it's just a matter of time that you will naturally stop it because you can't do it, and it will just harm you and cause more tension and more pain. So it's really to become aware of that this resistance is a natural consequence of what you have experienced over the last weeks, months, years, or whatever.
Yeah.
And just to be with this resistance can be the first step of practice. Just
Yeah.
to become aware of it's okay that I'm not in the mood to do X, Y, Z. And just being with that can be a great start.
Yeah.
Because in this stage, in this moment, you are embracing what's here, and you're not telling yourself that this is wrong or that you are wrong. And now you have a good start to go from there. And even this realization can be the practice for one day, for example, and then just slowly go from there.
Yeah, yeah. And that in and of itself is actually a very regulating process. Even before you start to do really anything, you just become aware of the resistance to connecting with your body. You know, we acknowledge that, hey, my body's been through a lot of things. It has remembered at a physiological level every experience that I've gone through from the moment that I was like a little seed in my mother's tummy. You know, we start receiving and picking up information from that level all the way through birth, all the way through childhood, all the way into adulthood. So the notion of just connecting with the body is it's actually quite a big thing, because we then start to process and come to terms with everything that we have gone through consciously and unconsciously. It's all there, it's all held within the body. It's a wonderful vehicle of intelligence and wisdom, and we can really get to know who we are by sustaining ourselves to observe all of that.
Yeah.
And rather than we often, I see this all the time when resistance comes up, and I've experienced it myself. You feel that resistance, and then you instantly try and find some sort of coping mechanism to feel better. You know,
Yeah.
you pick up the phone and scroll. It's like, I'll get a dopamine hit. This can all happen very reflexively, or can lead into, I'll just like do something that feels better, that I know isn't actually good for me, that my intent was to connect with my body or to support my health, and then I distract myself from that. And often what we are distracting ourselves from is those experiences that are unintegrated. And it doesn't mean that we need to necessarily go through some trauma release process. It's often just seeing and acknowledging that that is there and that we survived, and that we are ready to open up and reconnect back to this present moment in the body.
Yeah. Otherwise, it will get very chaotic, and you have an emotional response, and you create another emotion and lay that over that. And you just stack up layer by layer, and then it's no wonder that things get worse. It's just a wild mixture of anything.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really to become aware of what's there, and that's it.
Yeah.
And this is also not easy. What Benny and I are talking about here, it's not like that you will do this in the next second and feel like, oh yeah, I can understand what those guys are talking about. It took us many years to realize that. So don't put the pressure against yourself now that the only thing is to cognitively tell yourself that it's okay. It's a bit deeper than that. It's really to become aware of, and then feeling it's okay. But
Yeah.
it's not difficult, but it's not that easy, it sounds like here.
Yeah, yeah. And a simple way to get started with this to is really just to notice when the resistance comes up, and
Yeah.
to allow yourself a little bit longer to see it.
Yes.
This is the key thing, to then see the effect of it, because our thoughts, our breath, our our mind, our body, they're all inherently linked. What we get is an opportunity when we start to see that resistance, we see the effects that it has on the body, we feel maybe that chaos or that feeling or that intensity, and allow ourselves to be with it. All of a sudden, like you were saying before, Marcus, where we have the thought or the emotion or the sensation and then the reaction to it, and
Yeah.
then cascade of that, we can start to realize, oh, I am sitting in the middle of all of that, and I have power on where my attention goes. And then that creates a feedback loop that informs back into my body. And the moment you start to realize that, you then start to have this very conscious, like, level of empowerment to then how you direct your focus, how you direct your energy, how do you direct your thoughts rather than believing every single thought and feeling that comes up as true or
Yes.
denying it and avoiding it. So that's one of the key things when you feel that resistance, we see the resistance, see what that's about. And we develop a lot of self-compassion in this, I find, of going, yes, I've been through a lot of things. My body has carried a lot, and I'm scared of feeling, of just feeling. Yeah, and that is okay to admit.
Yeah. And also maybe often we are scared from the thoughts coming up, and also that is okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's a funny thing. Like there's a bit of a paradox here in that we can feel very out of control in this body because we don't have control over everything. And so that it can feel like when things have been going on for a long time and we've been dysregulated for a long time, that like our body is chaotic and living in it is uncomfortable. And we don't feel like we have any power and authority or control over that experience. But the flip side of it is while we don't have control over all the autonomic functions of the body, we do have control over the way we perceive it, the relationship that we have with it, and what we focus on continually. And then that then informs back those autonomic functions. So it's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves in of I don't have control over the speed of my heart rate, but the things that I focus on and the things that I do will influence my heart rate. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it can be really helpful to when you connect with the body, you feel that resistance, you might feel a bit out of control, but then realize you do have power and control over what you focus on, how you perceive what you are focusing on, and the relationship that you have with it. And often to shift the pattern, all we have to do is shift the relationship with the pattern.
That's true. And maybe this is a good thing to go into the next point, like shifting into slow and smooth movements. This
Yeah.
is what we can control.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In-
This good segment.
Instead of running around and oh, I need to do this and that, just coming back to really slow and smooth movements. And it can even start just with your hands and with your fingers. Just become aware of those little movements and just connect with that.
Yes.
And it will do some things with with your body, and your body will respond to this
Mm,
in a way of starting to relax and regulate. It's not that difficult. It's yeah, it can start with this little thing.
yeah.
Just in your hands slow and smooth. Become aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a
with that.
there's an image that pops up for me. I love old kung fu movies, and there's a you see this in a lot of those films where the person from the West comes to learn from the master from the East. And they might be like very adept to different degrees in martial arts, and they're like, like very, you would look at
Yeah,
and and in our culture, Western culture, like that is celebrated of like,
yeah,
whoa, look at all that you're so strong and powerful and doing all these moves. And then like doing all the moves, and then the master, he's like, attack me. And he's like, oh no. And then the master just like, phew, phew. And it like sort of turns to nothing very quickly. And it's not to sort of create a versus type scenario with this, but often culturally, and particularly with our like the ways that we work with our body and exercise habits and all that sort of stuff, are very contractive and tension focused. And it's kind of one half of the coin. And when we start to slow things down and smooth them out, we become aware of that habit that has been developed. And like there's one term, I'm talking with a friend who's a race driver, and he talks about slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And
yeah,
so I find that it's not like slow, smooth movements is like an eternal state that you need to be in to switch into the parasympathetic nervous system. But it's like an instrument that is so valuable to learn, to then start to redevelop the body in a way that is in balance and has a good flow of energy that we can then start to move more powerfully over time, but still be relaxed while we do it. And I find that that's a useful distinction rather than just being stuck in the slow, smooth movement camp, because I got stuck in there for a long time of like, oh no, this is the way. But it's a seed that leads to a pathway that gives more options when we're using our body, I find.
Yeah, and there will be a time when we are better connected to the body, that the body will just tell you now, okay, now I want to do fast things, just in a natural thing like we see with kids.
Yes.
It's just like you can feel it, that the energy is there and the body is giving you signals, okay, now run or now do this.
Yeah.
It's just this intelligence of the system which will always be there and regulate.
Yes.
So in a way, it's really easy to get stuck on an intellectual level. And yeah, I did this for myself too, of course. When you think, oh, now I got it, and this is the thing. And the more you practice, the more you see, okay, there are many things, and all things together are the thing. It's just like finding the right balance between slow movements and fast movements. It's really not that difficult. But in my personal story and also in yours, Benny, we did all the fast things. Then for many years, then we did all the slow things for many years to realize, oh yeah, there is a world in between, and then not getting stuck in this world or in that world, but more clearly perceive, okay, what is needed, and this is the mastery in a way. And
Yes.
yeah, and entry point for many us in the Western world is starting with slow movements, because we were stuck in all those output and fast movements for many years. So
Yes.
it's just a counterbalance act, but seeing this is not the solution, this is just a pathway.
Yeah. There's one other example that I think is helpful here is that, so when I first started practicing Tai Chi, and my teacher, who was an older gentleman, he I I thought, oh, this, I've got a background in movement and exercise, and I can do stuff. I'm flexible, blah blah blah, all this stuff. I should be able to do these slow movements so easily. And I remember when I was practicing some forms, and he came and gave me a fairly strong push and knocked me over quite easily, and not with any intent to be cruel, but to bring about a point of, he said, where are your roots? And I didn't even realize that I didn't have any at that point, and because my ego is like, yeah, I'm doing the movements just like you're doing them. But there was an underlying foundation that I wasn't even aware of that existed, was like the internal relaxation of my body. And when this gets talked about in a lot of Eastern based practices and martial arts and all that sort of stuff, like the developing of the roots is sort of like this ability for the body to be relaxed but active, so that then the weight is dropping down into the ground. So we literally, like, it feels like you have more roots.
Yeah.
And this started with those slow movements of noticing where the tension was, where I was holding it, and the patterns that I'd created to, like, essentially protect my body, develop an armor of protection to relinquish that, so then the body could become more of a unified structure as it moved, rather than just individual parts. It was the sum of the parts. And it then started, I saw where it developed, as, because Tai Chi can translate to grand ultimate fist. A lot of people don't realize that it can be a very powerful martial art. And my interpretation of that is, when the body is appropriately relaxed, then kinetic energy can move through it forcefully, from the ground through the center to the peripherals. And this is where we can not just utilize it for a therapeutic effect on the nervous system, but also to develop martial power. And in Tai Chi, they call that Fajin, which is like to elicit force powerfully, where the
Yeah.
force ripples through the body quite quickly. And so those slow movements and stillness practices were like the foundation that then that powerful movement was built upon after. And so for me, I had to take that step back and kind of relinquish a lot of that sort of individual muscular strength that I had developed, come back to, okay, my body is going to be stronger when it works as one. And
Yes.
then interestingly, it's sort of come full circle as to then see the benefit of both. And
Yes.
yeah, it brought, like, I really love the starting seed of bodybuilding, which was there's a guy called Eugene Sando, one of a guy that I was really inspired by early on in my 20s, and he was inspired by like Greco-Roman sculpture and like the development of the symmetry of the body, which sort of then turned into bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And it's obviously gotten pretty turned into its own beast there. But we see like at the core of all these things are actually really beautiful practices. And so like whereas the development of the mind muscle connection. And so I find if we can kind of combine both worlds, we're slowing things down, we're unifying the structure in our movements, and then also developing this sort of finite level of control through each individual part to then keep bringing it back into the whole. This is a really wonderful way to connect with the body. And as you do that, it does have a very regulating effect over time.
Yeah. And realizing in a nutshell what you were explaining, it's a tool to become aware of what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then starting making different choices, or when you move slow and you feel like in this area, oh yeah, in this millimeter I can feel tension building up, just stopping there and giving the body some time to regulate this tension, this disbalance.
Yes.
So it's not that you're doing the thing and the magic will happen. The thing is just a lens to look through
Mm.
and to teach you to become aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was also a thing I needed some some hours of practice to realize that, oh, it's not about the practice. The practice is just a lens to look through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And often a mirror, it just shows us what's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's good to go into this next part where so we've looked at resistance to even connecting with ourselves, with our body, identifying that can just continue to come up as you work with your body at deeper levels and as you're moving. And so just working with that, starting to slow things down and really connect with the body in slow, smooth movements can be really helpful. And then we inevitably bump up into the breathing because that's the
Yeah.
part illuminates our whole system. And so one of the goals that can be helpful is to gradually expand the breath capacity. This has been a really powerful missing link to my practice over the years, where bringing everything into coherence. I think initially I started very physically, and breathing was just a process that I didn't really think about. And then I started to realize that this is actually a very powerful tool. Like if we don't do it, we die. But if you really learn how to work with your breathing in your body, it has tremendous power for us to be able to really connect with the state of our nervous system and shift it very quickly. And so it doesn't just come with one breathing technique. I find that it's it's actually there is a physical development process of like being able to expand the breath. And that's a process that happens over time. So then we can shift the state of the nervous system more easily and faster because we kind of upgrade the hardware of our breathing. And this doesn't get talked about a lot. So I'd like to open up conversation around it.
Yeah. in today's fitness world and also maybe healing world, breath work is a very common term. And yeah, it can be useful, but so many people are coming to me and starting working with me, and they did the breath work thing, and they were not able to create any difference, or maybe things get worse. Because it starts at point one, what we were sharing today. If there is any resistance and you're trying to use the breath work to change things, things will get worse.
Yeah.
So it's just again like the slow, smooth movements. Breathing, breath work is just a tool. And the moment you're realizing that, okay, it's just a tool, and a tool needs some time to develop skill. And it's not like, oh no, because I did breathing for my my whole life, I can use this tool very handful, and I'm really good at using this tool. No, it's not like that. It's really starting to connect with the breath first and just observing your breathing. That's the start of your breath work. That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing about breathe that so many seconds and breathe so many seconds in and out and holding it and all that stuff. Forget it.
Yeah.
Just start with observing and becoming aware of. This is the first and foremost thing you have to do. And this will already start to change things. And will also be supportive in embracing in embracing the resistance. And
Mm.
it will support your slow movements. Yeah, that's the start in my experience.
Yeah, yeah. There's one distinction that I find really helpful is to like the the more capacity of breathing that we have, the more fuel we can bring into the system to be used for whatever that we want to use it for. And so often, though, if we haven't developed this system, or if this system has become atrophied because of a range of different circumstances, particularly with chronic conditions, like one of the primary things that gets restricted is the breath, like the diaphragm gets stuck, or like the rib cage and the lungs become restricted, like all of the torso, the fascial tissue gets bound up, and our ability to even take a deep breath is compromised. And so just trying to then change your biochemistry with some sort of breath work thing is going to put so much pressure on an already pressurized system. And like you were saying, Marcus, like we need to first come back to where are we at with our breathing, like even noticing that phenomena, and really how incredible it is that we can take a breath, and the functions, like when you really look into the breathing, like a lot of people don't realize when the air goes in through your nose, it doesn't just go straight in, like it spirals through the nasal cavity into the body. Like it's amazing what's going on with every breath. And like I get a little bit obsessive about this because I really do feel that we've lost touch with how amazingly powerful our body is and how much power we have with simple acts.
Yeah.
And really seeing how much is going on with these things. And but longer term, once we become aware of the breathing, even that in and of itself, you might notice I'm breathing really shallow. You feel that resistance or the judgment that you have about your breathing. And then we embrace that resistance. Okay, that's okay that I feel that way. I'm going to keep breathing and noticing. And then more things might come up. And then we start to move into acceptance. And it's like, okay, cool, this is where I'm at. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm inspired on what might happen if I were to expand the capacity of this thing. And then on and on it can go. And so I find having a metric can be really useful with this without forcing yourself to be in a particular place, or because we'll get to where we get to when we get there, as long as we just keep stepping. And
Yeah.
you know, we've all got our own timing and pace and all that sort of thing. But if you can do that, it's sort of like, minimum ambition, maximum patience is a useful saying that I find with this. But having the goal of for me, this was really helpful, and particularly when I got to this point, my whole physiology was different, was a lot more vital when I moved toward being able to breathe one breath per minute for at least a 5-minute period. And if you think about it, like a lot of people take probably like 10 plus breaths a minute. So I was definitely in that area where a lot, like I was chest breathing, I was mouth breathing a lot of the time. I was very tense. So just imagine the effect of reducing your amount of breath that you took and expanding your capacity for breathing by 10 times. Like that's basically what I did. And that's actually a very big change when you then carry that over to, even if I don't breathe one breath per minute for 5 minutes all day, having that capacity means that the amount of breaths that I need to take to sustain myself every day in every moment is less. So then there's less stress on the system. The nervous system is continually given the environment to maintain a more regulated state. And if I notice that it then goes out of balance, I can very quickly then come back and re-anchor and refocus. It's an incredibly wonderful gift that you can give to yourself through with a little bit of practice.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just like I'm in the space. I did some deep breath because Benny was talking about breathing. And this was just a moment of okay, no thoughts. It's really that powerful. Like when you're able to expand your breath capacity, you will find more and more space of like, oh, it's really silent. This stillness so many people are talking about, it's just happening. When your body is able to bring in more life force when we look at breathing from this perspective. And yeah, it's in a way the most wonderful gift you can, yeah, give yourself. And it needs just practice, as Benny said it before very very precisely, with minimum ambitiousness and maximum patience. Because when I look back, and we started to work together, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago already, and you were already talking about breathing, and we did that with the stopwatch. Like I can remember that I downloaded an interval timer, and I set up the timer and tried to punish myself to breathe 30 seconds in and 30 seconds out. And yeah, maybe for one breath I was able to do it, but afterwards my whole body was really in a fight and flight response because it was too much.
Yeah.
Because at this point in time, I thought, okay, when I can do this, everything will be better. And this is the pitfall where we often fall into with every practice.
Mhm.
Because we are suffering or we have pains. And yeah, and of course, this pain will cause suffering. Otherwise, we wouldn't search for any solution. And then we think like, oh yeah, this is the thing I have to do. And when I can do this, everything will be better.
I will be
And just
saved.
with, yes, and just with this thought, you're already lost. And yeah, maybe this is the playfulness which will come back naturally. and and we have understanding and we have compassion when you're not able to follow us fully what we are talking about here, because we have been through and we tried to breathe longer with with I have to do better and I have to do harder. It doesn't work this way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really brings the question that leads on to our final point. The question being, what is the quality in which I meet my practice, in which I meet my breath, my movement, myself? What is that quality that I am actually looking to cultivate? And this then really becomes about bringing the mind and the body into a coherent state where at the core of it is no matter what practice we're doing, and this is so absent in so many practices. Like I see it all the time. It causes people a lot of damage and suffering. Into it doesn't matter what you do, but how do you meet it? What is the quality? What like are you able to meet your body with a loving intent? Because
Yeah.
often we don't even know what that is because we weren't modeled that. We were not immersed in an environment that was of unconditional love. So, how can we cultivate that within ourselves? This is a question. It is possible. It takes some practice to reprogram, our selves, our mind, and but this is the core that we'll open up to is bringing the mind and the body into coherence and connecting with that loving intent. When we do that, this is a really wonderful seed with everything that we've been talking about to start to activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, and love is just a difficult term for many people because it's used a lot, and maybe a beginning and a more natural saying without dogmatic, without any without creating any dogmatic scenarios. Being okay with not being okay is maybe the first step of creating a loving intent. Like, yeah, it comes back to our first point today, embracing the resistance. So you can see the resistance and you are okay with that. It's already creating a loving intent
Mm,
because you see the problem and you don't go against it and you say, okay, it's just there. And this is the first step in just getting an idea and getting a feeling for what can it mean that body and mind are more coherent.
mm,
What can it mean to connect with a loving intent? It's just you watch out into nature and you see that everything is perfect and there is no problem happening because nature is just doing its thing. Yeah, this is a loving intent. It's just there and you don't have to do anything. And you see that everything works together. And
mm,
you can go a step further. You see the sun coming up on a daily basis, the moon coming up. Yeah, it's just happening without doing anything.
mm,
And maybe this can be a useful thing for, yeah, for people to connect with love from a different point of view,
mm.
just because this was necessary for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think, yeah, maybe if we flesh out coherence a little bit, because that could be some jargon as well that gets thrown around. But like, really, like, like, we're shifting from a state of where the mind and the body, or the idea of the mind and the body, is separate, where
Yeah.
we're kind of living from the head down. We start to, like, there is a merging between I'm not just my head. I am the sum of this and then more as we go into it. But it's sort of a process of bringing this into oneness where I start to see I have thoughts, I have emotions, I have sensations, and I'm interpreting them in different ways. What is the lens in which I interpret it through? And so it's sort of like putting them through the same prism and same focus. And one of the simplest ways is like being aware of our own intent. And so it's like, because a lot of the time when we're going into practice, we're not even aware of our intent of like to fix something, or the belief that we're broken and all of that. Like that cuts us off from that loving intent, that cuts us off from coherence, because then it creates a separation between, well, my mind believes this, but my body is just doing its best to survive, and my mind is still kicking it while it's down. Like that is not coherence. So,
No,
you know,
it
it's
it also goes wonderful in all those self-optimization things like I need to be better, or I want to be the best version of myself or whatever. This also can be very limiting because you don't know what it's gonna be like. You just have this moment and you just can become aware of what's happening and then using the practice as a driver to just see what's happening.
Mm.
It's just a thought coming up when you were talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, to see what's happening and to see our relationship with it.
yeah,
And that's what creates the quality of the practice. And so I find sometimes we bump into the challenges to like, well, how do I like dial into a radio station that I just have never heard, that I don't know how to get there. And this is often like if we're saying things like, connect with a loving intent with your body, like you were saying before, Marcus, it can be obscure. And
yeah,
what does that even mean? And so sometimes it can be helpful to, like you were saying before, to anchor into what is loving to you and then connecting with that within you, because we are part of nature, you know. We wouldn't be here if it didn't exist. We're in participation with our environment. And so it can be a person, a place, a thing. Initially, these can be really wonderful anchor points, like the feeling of the sun on your skin. And then
yeah,
you connect with that. And then the nervous system starts to like nerves that fire together wire together. And so
yeah,
like by just bringing our focus to that experience and then starting to internalize it, it changes the state of the nervous system and
yeah,
whole cellular environment. And so that can be a really practical way to get started as we're working with the body, as we're working with moving the body, as we're working with our breathing. We're starting to connect with whatever that loving intent is and like bringing that through every one of our cells as we're moving. And that's one key piece. If you could just become aware of that, this would it would save me a lot of time. I think it would save
yeah,
if we do that one thing, because there's so much trying to do this practice to get this thing is just going to keep you in this churn and burn loop where you're never going to get there, and you're going to eventually, hopefully, see that you have been seeing yourself in such a negative light and
yeah,
and operating out of a state of I am separate. So let's sort of shorten that process a little bit and come back to, well, how do we connect back to the nature that we are, which is, in my belief, love. I really do believe that. And whatever that means to you, I'm not here to say what that is, but I really do believe in the goodness of the human spirit and the heart that we have. And even when people do bad things to us and it hurts, still underneath that, someone else did something to someone and someone, and on that went for a long time. And here we are at a point in our evolution, in our society, where a lot of bad shits happened for a long time. And we are transmuting that, I believe, back into a more loving experience. And it starts with each and every one of us. And so I'm not here to tell anyone what to do, but like I know what feels better in my body. And so these things can be really helpful if you do find that you are stuck in that overactive fight, flight, freeze mode, and you want to keep coming back to that more kind of calming, restorative, that parasympathetic mode. Follow these four things in your own way. Maybe use some of the perspectives that we've shared to help you get there. Embrace that resistance that inevitably will come up. Slow things down, smooth them out in your movement. Work on gradually expanding your hardware of your breathing, expanding your capacity of your breathing, and continuing to become aware and bring your body and your mind into coherence and unifying it around whatever loving intent is there for you. If you do those four things, let us know. I think you're going to get on a positive path, and it doesn't have to be that you're doing a particular practice like that is some big idea. Like, I love all those things, but at the core of it, like, where did all these practices, qigong, yoga, tai chi, or meditation, where did all of this start? It's these basic principles, I find. So
Yeah. And it gives the power back to you as the practitioner.
yeah.
And this was also one big thing I had to realize. So the power is in myself and not in the practice. And those four things we share today will also support this realization. And if you need some support, check out our app or Movement Plus app, or write us a message for more personal work. We are here and glad to share some further things with conversations like this in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.